I knew the day would go south the moment Chase Latham strutted into Rovian Dynamics like he'd just been knighted by Wall Street. Tailored suit, pocket square folded with algorithmic precision, and that smug MBA grin, the kind they issue right after graduation with a minor in talking over women. He strolled through reception, tossing around buzzwords like confetti. Synergy, leverage, optimization. The poor receptionist nodded politely, trapped in the linguistic assault. I watched from behind my coffee mug, an under-caffeinated spectator to the birth of chaos. He didn't notice me, of course. Guys like Chase never do. Not until you hand them their own obituary disguised as a project memo. The elevator ride to the 31st floor felt like a hostage situation. Chase was holding the entire cabin captive with his monologue about lean ops and modern workflows. I'd been keeping this company's compliance spine straight for 12 years, while he was still learning to spell due diligence. By the time we reached our floor, he'd already managed to mispronounce the CFO's name and brag about how legacy staff needed to learn from his leadership model. That legacy staff? Yeah, that was me. Victoria Hale, Senior Director of Operations and the woman who once saved this company from a multi-million-dollar procurement scandal. He winked as the doors opened. "Can't wait to meet the veterans," he said, voice dripping with self-importance. I smiled thinly. "Oh, you'll meet them," I replied. That was Monday. By Friday, my access had started disappearing. Calendar invites vanished one by one. Strategic channels I'd built over a decade suddenly marked restricted. The new COO, Kendra Malone, a Scottsdale import with a private equity gleam in her eye, called it restructuring. "Victoria, we see you more in an advisory capacity now," she said with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Eyes on the long game. That's corporate code for go die quietly while the rookie takes your office." I nodded, said of course, and walked back to my glass cubicle, the one I'd fought to keep when they remodeled. Shut the door, opened my file drawer, pulled out a folder labeled in thick black Sharpie. Latham, activity log. Inside was an email chain 2 years long. Vendor disputes, version logs, drafts he'd never seen, deals he'd never brokered. I added one new sheet and stapled the packet closed. That was the day I stopped relying on cloud storage and started trusting paper again. Within 2 weeks, my inbox was a desert. 2 of my analysts, bright kids I'd mentored through their first acquisitions, were reassigned for visibility. Chase told them directly, "You'll have more upward trajectory under me." One mouthed sorry as he packed his keyboard. I just nodded. I didn't yell, didn't fight. I bought a new encrypted flash drive instead. Copied everything: vendor chains, audit trails, investor contacts, every bite of history I'd built since 2010. Organized, indexed, color-coded, time-stamped. People think revenge is loud. Mine came in kilobytes. Chase started leading Thursday strategy meetings with a deck he didn't write and a smirk that made you want to unplug the projector. Every sentence started with, "in my experience," and ended in buzzword soup. I watched quietly, noting who laughed at his jokes. Then came the M&A prep call. He smiled through the webcam like a game show host and said, "Victoria's foundational work got us here, but it's time to modernize." My jaw didn't move. My pulse didn't spike. But I saw red. When the meeting ended, I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, breathing slow through my teeth. Foundational? Dated? Legacy? Fine. I'd show him what legacy means. It began small. A missing invite here, a revoked folder there. Then came the big one, our document hub. I logged in Monday morning to upload a vendor audit. Access denied. A polite red banner. Corporate middle finger. When I asked it, the reply came fast. Per VP Latham's request. Strategic operations files are now restricted. No apology. No reason. Just erasure. That night, I stayed late. The janitor passed by once, humming softly, the only other witness. I unlocked my drawer and lifted out a stack of binders, heavy with the weight of forgotten history. Contracts, clauses, signed approvals, every backbone document Chase had no idea existed. The printer whirred alive. I whispered to it, "One more night, old friend." By 11:40, the office lights were dim, the air stale. I looked at the piles of paper, neat, coded, airtight. He thought he'd deleted me. All he'd really done was drive me offline, where he couldn't touch me. By Tuesday morning, my access badge still worked, which told me one thing. Chase Latham wasn't brave enough to finish the job. Men like him never are. They prefer slow erasure, quiet deletions, rewritten org charts, whispered updates in meetings you're no longer invited to. He operated like a rat in loafers, fast, hidden, and just greasy enough to slip through cracks without leaving fingerprints. Within days, I saw my former team speaking in careful tones, rehearsing new phrases that didn't belong to them. Streamlined leadership, vertical synergy. I'd built that team from interns to analysts, taught them how to stand their ground in front of VPs who couldn't spell accrual. Now, they looked like hostages reading from cue cards. One evening, as I refilled my mug in the break room, I overheard two of them practicing slides for a presentation. Mine. Same structure, same timeline, even my phrasing. When they saw me, one flinched like I'd caught him stealing holy relics. "Chase wants it rebranded," he muttered. "Simplified. Says it'll read better to the board." I smiled. "He's right," I said. "Just remember who taught you what simplify really means." That night, I stayed again. The office was silent, except for the air conditioning's tired hum and the flick of fluorescent lights over cubicles that still carried the ghosts of real work. I unlocked my fireproof cabinet and pulled out binders I hadn't touched since 2014. Original vendor contracts, supplier amendments, pre-acquisition architecture drafts, handwritten notes from meetings with our first investors. Every detail was there. Not just the skeleton of Rovian's success, but the DNA, the molecular code. And Chase? He'd just stolen the bones, painted them gold, and called it innovation. By midnight, I was halfway through cataloging my archive. 3 flash drives, each encrypted, each labeled with a single letter, A, B, and C. Archival, backup, and contingency. I'm not superstitious, but I swear the air felt heavier that night, like the office itself knew something was shifting. That's when I remembered Marcus Doyle, our former CFO, now sitting on the board of Vatra Capital, the parent firm planning to absorb Rovian. Marcus had once told me over bad airport coffee, "If this place ever goes to hell, you're the only one who can drag it back." He was the kind of man who didn't waste words, so when he said that, I made a mental note. Keep receipts. I still had his private Gmail, the one he used back when we'd troubleshoot vendor clauses off the record. I hadn't touched it in years, but I kept the password in a file labeled Retired Projects. I opened it. The interface felt like a relic. Drafted an email with no names, no attachments, just breadcrumbs. Subject, Legacy Pipeline Inquiry. Continuity Chain Validation. Body, M. Looping back on archival continuity specs under pre-transition roadmap. Have full revision history confirming authorship lineage. Requesting confirmation whether original operational clause remains active under parent review. V. I read it 3 times, stripped every trace of emotion, and hit send. Then I leaned back and watched the screen like it was a bomb I'd just armed. Chase might have had the spotlight, but I had the blueprints, the wiring diagram, and the switch. By Thursday, he was swaggering through the leadership sink like a prom king whose crown came with stock options. His cologne hit the air before he did, something expensive that tried too hard. He stood at the head of the table, projector glowing behind him, his voice dripping with performative confidence. "Before we dive into metrics," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "just a quick look at the acquisition framework we'll be presenting next week." He tapped the clicker, and there it was, my architecture, my sequence. My notes, stripped of color coding, renamed Q3 Operational Rollout Framework by C. Latham. Slide 14 even had the same risk markers I'd invented, just recolored in navy blue. He didn't look at me while he spoke, but I could feel the smug satisfaction radiating from him like static. When he called my work foundational but outdated, I smiled so faintly it hurt. Legacy. Outdated. Forgotten. Perfect. He thought this was about ego. It wasn't. It was about authorship. And authorship, in the corporate world, is power. The kind that doesn't roar. It signs. It timestamps. It buries itself in metadata where fraudsters don't bother to look. After the meeting, I returned to my office, locked the door, and plugged in my encrypted drive. Created a new folder, Acquisition, Original Framework, authored by VH. Inside, I dropped side-by-side versions of his deck and mine, version histories, email timestamps, audio snippets from my original scoping calls. Each file its own quiet bullet. Then I drafted a new email. Subject, Authorship Verification, Operational Architecture. Body, please find enclosed documentation verifying original framework authorship per internal audit trail. Ready for disclosure upon legal trigger. V. Saved it. Didn't send. Not yet. Because Chase thought the war was being fought in the boardroom. He didn't realize I'd already moved the battlefield underground. It came quietly, the way most reckonings do. Not with an alarm, but with a single notification ping at 2:19 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch in my apartment, surrounded by the comforting chaos of takeout boxes and highlighters when my laptop blinked to life. One new message, no subject, no sender label, just a small file attachment, TXN, clause, V3, draft. Tink, and beneath it, a note, short, sharp, almost poetic in its restraint. They kept your language. Thought you should know. I didn't have to guess. Marcus Doyle still wrote emails like a man etching warnings into marble. I opened the file, my pulse steady, but my hands trembling ever so slightly. The decryption key still worked, the same one we'd set up 9 years ago in a Denver hotel bar, after surviving a 27-hour merger negotiation that had turned both of us into caffeine-driven philosophers. The passphrase, Ghostwood. The document unfolded line by line, sterile and legal. And then, there it was. Paragraph 7, Clause B. My phrasing, my syntax, my rhythm. Operational transition shall proceed in accordance with the pre-existing continuity plan, barring disputes of authority. I exhaled slowly, almost laughing. They hadn't scrubbed me out completely. My words had survived, buried like fossils under Chase's shiny new veneer. But survival wasn't enough. Not yet. So I added one sentence, precise, surgical, invisible to anyone scanning too fast. In such cases, executive continuity shall default to the most tenured operations lead, effective immediately upon dispute recognition. It wasn't a weapon. It was a tripwire, not a power grab, not a demand, just a law of gravity, written in 12-point Times New Roman, waiting for the right fool to fall. Then I did what Chase could never imagine. I removed all author metadata, flattened the PDF, re-encrypted it, and sent it right back to the same silent inbox it came from. No signature, no trace, no name. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark with my coffee and the low hum of my printer, my only witness. Somewhere 3 time zones away, Marcus would open that file, see the addition, and understand. Men like him didn't need explanations. They just needed the clause to exist. The next morning, the office air was charged. Too quiet. Too brittle. You could feel it in the way people paused before swiping their badges, like the building itself knew a storm was coiling behind the glass. Then Chase arrived, His cologne hit before his voice did, a synthetic mix of citrus, ego, and borrowed confidence. He strode into the Monday all hands like he owned the patent on charisma. "Momentum is strong," he declared. "Alignment's tight. We're negotiating from a place of strength." The team clapped. Of course they did. They always clap when the guillotine's still under the table. I sat at the back, tapping my pen once against my notebook. Not nervously, but rhythmically. Calm heartbeat. Control. They didn't know that beneath Chase's polished slides, beneath the fake numbers and self-congratulation, a single line of text now sat quietly inside the legal core of the deal. My clause, my ghost. Not revenge, not vanity, just inevitability. When the meeting ended, Chase strutted out with his usual entourage. Kendra, the COO who'd once called me foundational, and 2 analysts he'd poached from my team. They laughed at something he said about old systems and dinosaurs. I let them, because sometimes the best feeling in the world isn't proving someone wrong. It's letting time do it for you. That afternoon, I received a calendar invite from Legal, Final Acquisition Review, hosted at the Grand Regency Hotel, downtown Chicago. High ceilings, bad coffee, $1,000,000 consequences. I knew that room. I'd spent half my career sitting at its table, keeping sharks from biting through their own tails. This time, I wouldn't be at the head. I wouldn't even be at the table. I'd be near the coat rack, silent, invisible. And that was exactly where the power belonged. Because Chase thought victory came from being seen. I'd learned long ago, real control comes from writing the sentence no one reads until it's too late. You could smell tension before even stepping into the Grand Regency's conference suite. That sterile mix of cologne, overconditioned air, and panic disguised as professionalism. Every deal I'd ever seen crash had started with that same scent. The room looked like a scene out of a political thriller. Chrome coffee carafes, designer suits, nervous smiles stretching just a little too tight. Everyone clutched their notepads like shields, pretending this was business as usual, not a knife fight wrapped in PowerPoint. I took my seat near the back, not at the main table, near the ficus, beside a coat rack that held the kind of jackets people wore to disguise fear as authority. No laptop, no notes. Just a small manila envelope resting quietly beside my folded hands. Across the room, Chase Latham was in full performance mode, pacing near the projector, a peacock in polished leather shoes. His voice carried that artificial confidence you only hear from men who think applause equals respect. "So," he began, flashing that rehearsed grin, "to reiterate our position, Rovian Dynamics is approaching this acquisition with seamless vertical integration. Operational control stays consolidated, continuity ensured under my office." He flicked the clicker. The screen behind him glowed with his stolen slides. My structure, my phrasing, my bloodlines dressed up in his font. The new title glared, Operational Continuity Framework by C. Latham. And there it was, slide 14. The risk index I'd built years ago, red flags and all. Still sitting there like ghosts he forgot to exercise. At the far end of the table sat Angela Pierce, lead counsel for Vitra Capital. Sharp navy suit, sharper eyes, her reputation for precision bordering on myth. Next to her, Marcus Doyle, silent and still, arms folded across a binder labeled simply, Transaction File, Final Draft. I could feel it. That hum before the fall. "I do have a question," Angela said finally, her tone even, cold, deliberate. "Section 7 references a continuity clause. I'd like clarification on that language." Chase didn't even pause. He waved his hand like he was shooing away a fly. "Standard boilerplate," he said. "Doesn't affect buyer authority. All transition routing goes through my office." Marcus didn't move, didn't even blink. He just leaned back, eyes flicking once. To me. Angela raised a brow, pen hovering above her page. "You're certain?" she asked. Chase smiled wider. "Positive." I exhaled once, slow and silent, then slid my fingertip to the edge of the manila envelope beside me, gave it a gentle nudge forward. He kept talking. About synergy, about momentum, about alignment. Words stacked on words, meaningless scaffolding around an empty house. Angela flipped a page in her binder. Her movements were surgical, each motion clean, deliberate. She stopped on one tab, the crimson one, the same shade we'd used years ago for final signatures. Interesting, she said quietly, because this clause references continuity reassignment upon dispute. The air changed temperature. You could almost hear the air conditioning choke on the silence. Chase blinked. "Excuse me?" Angela's eyes didn't rise. "It states, and I quote, 'Executive continuity shall default to the most tenured operations lead, effective immediately upon dispute recognition.'" Every pen in the room froze mid-note. "That can't be right," Chase said, voice cracking just slightly. "That wasn't in the last draft." Angela didn't look up. "It's in the signed one." She slid her copy across the table, pages marked, time-stamped, ink still visible from the signature page. The one registered under the board's archive, complete with embedded metadata from the original authorship. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, the faintest smirk forming at the corner of his mouth. "You might want to sit down, son," he said quietly. Chase hesitated. His bravado faltered for the first time in months. Then slowly, he sat. I stayed perfectly still, didn't speak, didn't smile. Because the best part of a trap isn't watching it close. It's knowing exactly when to stop pulling the rope. Angela continued reading. Given the presence of a live dispute regarding transition authority, effective immediately, oversight shifts to the most tenured operations lead. She looked up then, eyes meeting mine for the first time. "That would be you, Ms. Hale." No sound, no applause, just gravity. Chase's mouth opened, but all that came out was static. And in that silence, my heartbeat was the only thing that dared to make noise. For a few long seconds, the air didn't move. You could almost hear every molecule recalibrating, a boardroom holding its breath as one career quietly died. Chase Latham looked down at the paper in front of him like he could somehow will it to change. His jaw flexed, his mouth twitching for words that refused to arrive. Angela Pierce had already moved on, flipping to another section with clinical detachment, her pen gliding over lines like she was stitching up a wound. "This clause is enforceable upon any internal dispute of control," she said evenly, which, considering Mr. Latham's previous statement, she paused, letting silence underline the point, qualifies as such. Marcus Doyle leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice was soft, almost kind, the way you speak to someone about to realize gravity still works. Effective immediately, Victoria Hale assumes operational oversight. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. The entire room did. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, the manila envelope now lying open beside me. No smile, no nod, just stillness. Because real authority doesn't need to raise its voice. It just needs to stop waiting for permission. Chase tried to speak again, a broken laugh cutting through the quiet. "Hold on, you can't just... This isn't how protocol..." Angela's pen tapped once against her folder. "It's exactly how protocol works, Mr. Latham. You should have reviewed all clauses before presenting them as finalized." He turned toward Kendra Malone, the COO who'd once called me foundational. She didn't meet his eyes. She just closed her tablet, stood, and walked behind his chair. "Chase," she said softly, "let's step outside." Her tone carried the kind of corporate mercy reserved for executioners. She reached down, lifted his company-issued tablet from the table, and held it like it was radioactive. He froze. His hands twitched, but he didn't move. Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. We'll proceed with transition under Ms. Hale's direction. Wait, Chase said again, desperate now. You can't just hand her my deal. I've been leading this for months. Angela didn't even blink. According to this, she tapped the binder again. She's been leading it for 12 years. A quiet chuckle escaped from somewhere near the back. Someone tried to mask it as a cough. Chase's face drained of color. His perfect tan faded to office wall beige. He turned toward me at last, eyes wide, confused, a mixture of anger and disbelief swirling like a storm that had already spent itself. You did this. I met his stare evenly. No, I said. You did this the moment you stopped reading. He opened his mouth again, but Marcus was already standing. Thank you for your contributions, Mr. Latham. HR will coordinate your offboarding. That was it. 3 sentences, clean and surgical. The sound of a career ending in real time. He looked around the room for an ally. None came. Not the COO, not the analyst he'd stolen, not even the intern who once worshipped him for knowing how to say synergy with a straight face. The door opened behind him. 2 security staff stood waiting, polite, silent, final. Chase swallowed hard, adjusted his tie that no longer fit, and walked toward the door in slow motion. Every step sounded heavier than the last. When the glass door closed, Angela finally exhaled, as if she'd been holding the weight of his ego in her lungs. Marcus turned to me. You've been quiet. Sometimes that's the job, I said softly. He nodded once, reached into his briefcase, and pulled out a slim black folder. The board anticipated this outcome. They'd like you to formalize the operational transition under your name. Inside was a single sheet, simple, elegant, terrifying in its power. Appointment: Victoria Hale, Executive Director, Strategic Operations and Continuity. I traced the letters with my fingertips, the way you do when something feels both earned and inevitable. Angela closed her binder, stood, and extended a hand. Congratulations, Ms. Hale. It's refreshing to see competence reinstated. Thank you, I said. But it's not over yet, because it never really is. There's always another clause, another meeting, another man who thinks the rules don't apply to him. But in that room, under those buzzing fluorescent lights, something in me went still. The noise stopped. The pretending stopped. And for the first time in years, I wasn't legacy staff. I was the legacy. The moment the glass door shut behind Chase Latham, the silence in the conference room changed texture. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was clean, the kind of silence that follows a storm, when the air finally remembers how to breathe. Angela Pierce sat back down, flipping through the contract pages one last time, like a surgeon checking for residual bleeding. Kendra remained standing, expression carved from porcelain, the embodiment of corporate survival instinct. Marcus Doyle was the only one who seemed relaxed, his calm carrying that quiet authority only men who've seen every kind of collapse can possess. I stayed seated near the end of the table, hands folded over the folder Marcus had just given me. No one said a word for a long time. The projector's fan whirred softly, a dying mechanical heartbeat fading into stillness. Finally, Marcus broke it. Let's finalize transition. His tone left no room for debate. The meeting reconvened, but the energy was different now. No more pretense, no more peacocking. Everyone was suddenly aware of the gravitational shift. For months, Chase had filled the room with noise, slides, slogans, and false certainty. Now, with him gone, you could hear ideas again. Angela directed her gaze toward me. Ms. Hale, I'll need your confirmation of authorship and continuity of governance as outlined under Clause 7B. I nodded, sliding forward the binder I'd brought. My real one, not the showpiece. Tabs, highlights, audit trails. All of it color-coded down to the minute. Everything's time-stamped, I said. Version logs, vendor communication threads. All pre-transition documentation intact. The architecture hasn't changed. It's just been misattributed. Marcus gave the faintest of smiles. And now, properly restored. The assistant from legal, poor kid looked about 12, scribbled notes as if this was some kind of holy ritual. Maybe it was. In the corporate world, paper is scripture, signatures are psalms, and the faithful are whoever survives the audit. Angela nodded once, her approval as rare as sunlight in winter. We'll circulate the revised governance memo by end of day. The rest of the meeting dissolved into logistics, deadlines, restructuring, compliance checkpoints. I answered calmly, efficiently, as if the last 30 minutes hadn't been the quietest coup of my career. At one point, Kendra spoke. Victoria, I'll need to brief HR on reporting changes. Of course, I said. Tell them to keep Chase's access suspended until we finish the audit. After that, we'll discuss transitional documentation. The word transitional hung in the air like perfume. Everyone knew what it meant. When it was finally over, the room emptied in silence. One by one, they left. Angela with her precision stride, Marcus with his knowing half-smile, Kendra lingering just long enough to look at me, then looking away. I stayed behind. The chairs still carried the warmth of the people who'd sat in them. The projector screen was blank now, a pale ghost of Chase's stolen presentation. Papers scattered across the table. The kind of mess only truth can make when it finally surfaces. I gathered my things slowly. The manila envelope, the folder with my new appointment letter, a pen I'd been using since my first day at Rovian Dynamics 12 years ago. The ink was fading, but it still worked. When I looked up, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Steady, composed. Older maybe, but not tired. Just finished. Down the hallway, I could see Chase through the glass doors at reception. He stood with a security escort, waiting for his personal box of belongings. An iPad, a mug, a photo frame with someone's smile he probably never earned. He didn't look up. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor like the universe had finally whispered the one truth he couldn't argue with. You weren't built for the weight you stole. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk. That wasn't my style. I walked past him, heels soft against the carpet, eyes forward. The security guard nodded at me. Chase didn't. Outside, Chicago's afternoon light spilled through the glass atrium, bright, unfiltered, the kind of light that forgives nothing. I paused for a second, let it hit my face, and exhaled. No champagne, no applause, just peace. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about restoration, the quiet satisfaction of seeing order return to the place where chaos once pretended to be leadership. My phone buzzed once, a text from Marcus. Claws worked, proud of you, dinner's on me next week. I smiled, just barely. Typed back one word, Ghostwood. Then slipped the phone into my bag, pulled the door open, and stepped into the light.